Buckle up, because what you're about to hear isn't just another celebrity rumor. It's a viral firestorm that's forcing Hollywood into uncomfortable silence. Behind the red carpets, the flawless interviews, and the carefully managed images, an explosive online allegation has surfaced, one that's spreading faster than facts can catch up. A controversial media personality has ignited the internet with claims involving Teyana Taylor. Claims so serious, they've triggered panic, backlash, and non-stop debate across social media. No official confirmations, no public documents, just whispers, resurfaced clips, and a narrative that's growing louder by the hour.
Or was it a relationship? Here's the thing. I know TT got upset with me when I said that she was too clingy. It was given too much too soon.
Fans are divided. Some are demanding answers. Others are warning about the danger of believing accusations without proof. And caught in the middle is an industry known for one thing above all else: protecting its own. According to online chatter, this story isn't just about relationships or reputation. It's about trust, silence, and how quickly allegations can spiral into something far bigger than gossip. Lawyers stay quiet, publicists stay silent, and every unanswered question fuels another theory. So ask yourself this: when powerful names collide with unverified claims, who controls the truth? And once a story like this escapes into the internet, can it ever really be stopped? What started as a single podcast segment quickly turned into one of the most volatile online conversations Hollywood has seen in years. Within hours, clips were circulating, timelines were being rebuilt, and two familiar names were suddenly locked together in a narrative neither had publicly confirmed. This wasn't a press release. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was an allegation-driven discussion that exploded across social media before anyone could slow it down. At the center of the storm was a controversial media figure known for pushing boundaries and challenging celebrity silence. During a recent broadcast, she suggested that a long-rumored story involving Teyana Taylor had been deliberately kept out of public view. She did not present official documentation on air. She did not name medical providers. But the way she framed her words, cautious, deliberate, repeatedly emphasizing that she was sharing what she claimed to have been shown, immediately set off alarms online. Listeners weren't reacting to proof. They were reacting to implication. Within minutes, hashtags began trending. Old interviews resurfaced. Red carpet footage was replayed, with new interpretations layered on top. Fans and critics alike began asking the same question: why now? If these claims had been circulating privately, why were they suddenly being spoken about publicly? According to online commentary, the story wasn't new. It had simply never been loud, whispered among insiders, alluded to in blind items, quietly avoided in mainstream interviews. And when something stays buried long enough, the moment it resurfaces feels explosive, even without verification. What made this situation especially intense was the tone of the discussion. This wasn't framed as gossip. It was framed as concern, as risk, as something that, if true, would cross the line from celebrity drama into a much more serious conversation about responsibility, silence, and public reaction. No official statements were released. No legal filings surfaced. But the absence of denial didn't calm the internet. It fueled it. As people revisited Teyana Taylor's past relationships, they began drawing connections that may or may not have existed. Timelines were speculated about. Breakups were reinterpreted. Moments once considered private were now treated like clues in a larger puzzle. Supporters warned against this behavior, calling it dangerous and unfair. Critics argued that public figures invite scrutiny once allegations enter public discourse, even when unproven. Caught in the middle of this digital chaos was actor Aaron Pierre. Though he had not spoken publicly about any of this, his name became increasingly linked to the conversation through online speculation alone. Fans revisited his recent appearances, noting what they believed were changes in demeanor, more reserved interviews, heavier pauses, guarded expressions. Others pushed back hard, reminding everyone that interpreting emotion from edited clips is unreliable and often misleading. Still, once a narrative forms online, logic rarely stops it. The conversation expanded beyond individuals and into something much larger: Hollywood culture itself. Commentators began questioning whether the industry prioritizes image over transparency, whether silence is rewarded more than honesty, whether powerful people are shielded while uncomfortable stories are redirected, delayed, or quietly erased. This wasn't about proving anything. It was about perception. And perception, in the digital age, moves faster than facts. Reaction videos flooded platforms. Some creators were careful, repeatedly stating that everything discussed was alleged. Others leaned into shock-driven titles and thumbnails, blurring the line between commentary and accusation. As views climbed, nuance disappeared. The story became less about what was known and more about what felt possible. One of the most disturbing aspects of the situation was how quickly it shifted from curiosity to certainty for some viewers. Repeated speculation began sounding like established truth in certain online spaces. Phrases like "allegedly" were dropped, questions turned into conclusions, and once that happens, reputational damage becomes almost impossible to reverse. Supporters of Teyana Taylor emphasized the danger of this shift. They pointed out how often confident women are reframed as suspicious once a narrative turns negative. They warned that history is full of false accusations that gained momentum simply because the internet decided they were interesting. On the other side, critics argued that dismissing every allegation as rumor allows real issues to hide indefinitely. They claimed uncomfortable conversations are necessary, even when messy. That silence benefits power more than truth. Both arguments clashed endlessly, and neither side could slow the story down. As the days passed, the lack of official response became its own storyline. Some interpreted silence as legal caution. Others saw it as strategic. In today's media environment, saying nothing is rarely neutral. It becomes a blank canvas where audiences project fear, guilt, control, or collapse. Meanwhile, industry insiders, or people claiming to be insiders, added fuel through anonymous posts and cryptic comments. Nothing concrete, nothing verifiable, just enough ambiguity to keep the conversation alive. What made this moment especially volatile was the emotional investment. Viewers weren't just entertained, many were unsettled. The allegations being discussed touched on themes far bigger than celebrity romance: trust, safety, responsibility, and what happens when private matters become public narratives without confirmation. This is how stories evolve now, not through evidence first, but through reaction. By the time mainstream outlets began acknowledging that a viral discussion was happening, the narrative had already taken shape online. Reputations were being questioned, motivations were being debated, and both Aaron Pierre and Teyana Taylor were now tied together in a storyline neither had publicly authored. Whether these claims eventually collapse or lead to clarification remains unknown. But one thing is already certain. Once an allegation enters the digital bloodstream, it doesn't disappear. It mutates. It resurfaces. It waits for the next moment of silence to grow louder. And as millions continue watching, sharing, reacting, and speculating, the line between curiosity and consequence becomes dangerously thin. This wasn't just a trending topic anymore. It was a case study in how quickly perception can replace proof, and how once that happens, the damage doesn't need confirmation to be real. By the time the conversation reached its second wave, something important had shifted. This was no longer just about what was allegedly said on a podcast. It was about how the internet reacts when serious claims enter public space without confirmation, and how quickly silence becomes interpreted as meaning. In today's digital culture, the absence of a response is rarely treated as neutral. When days pass without statements, audiences don't pause, they speculate. And speculation, repeated often enough, begins to feel like information. That's exactly what happened here. Online commentators began framing the situation as a test. Who speaks first? Who stays quiet? Who controls the narrative? Each hour without clarification created space for theories to grow. And once those theories found traction, they were no longer limited to the original allegation. They expanded outward, touching past relationships, career decisions, and moments that had nothing to do with the initial claims. This is how stories metastasize online. Aaron Pierre's name continued to circulate, not because of anything he said, but because of what people believed they saw. Fans analyzed interviews frame by frame, comparing his tone now to years ago. Some claimed he appeared more guarded. Others said that interpretation was unfair and rooted in confirmation bias. But disagreement didn't stop the analysis. It amplified it. Meanwhile, Teyana Taylor's public image became a focal point in a different way. Supporters argued that confidence and control are often misread when narratives turn hostile. They pointed out how easily strong personalities become targets once speculation enters the room. Critics countered that public figures benefit from attention when it's positive and can't fully opt out when it turns uncomfortable. Neither side was wrong, and neither side was slowing down. As reaction videos multiplied, creators began shaping the narrative through tone rather than facts. Some approached the topic cautiously, emphasizing that nothing had been verified. Others leaned into implication, using dramatic pauses, ominous music, and suggestive thumbnails. The words allegedly remained, but the delivery often overshadowed the disclaimer. That's when the conversation crossed a critical line, from discussion to belief. Repeated exposure to the same ideas began hardening opinions. Viewers who watched multiple videos started to feel informed, even though no new evidence had surfaced. This is a known pattern in viral media. Familiarity creates confidence, and confidence, once formed, resists correction. Another layer entered the discussion: industry behavior. Commentators began asking why Hollywood often feels silent during moments like this. Is it legal advice? Is it strategic patience? Or is it something deeper, a system built to minimize risk rather than address discomfort publicly? These questions weren't directed at any one person, but the timing made them feel uncomfortably relevant. Stories from the past were brought up as comparisons, allegations that were ignored until they exploded, rumors dismissed until they became lawsuits, silence that protected brands but harmed individuals. None of these parallels proved anything about the current situation, but they shaped how audiences interpreted it. Context became confirmation. As days passed, the emotional tone of the conversation intensified. Some viewers expressed genuine concern, not for drama, but for what the allegations implied if they were true. Others expressed frustration, warning that speculation alone can destroy lives just as easily as wrongdoing can. This emotional divide kept engagement high. People weren't just watching for updates, they were waiting for a turning point, a statement, a denial, a clarification, something to anchor the story to reality. Until then, the internet continued filling the silence with its own conclusions. Another important shift occurred when people began discussing consequences rather than truth. Careers, mental health, long-term reputation. Viewers asked whether either individual could ever fully escape the shadow of this moment, regardless of how it ends. History suggests that even disproven allegations leave residue. Screenshots don't disappear, and context is rarely reposted with equal force. This raised uncomfortable questions about responsibility in the creator economy. Who benefits when a story like this explodes? Who pays the price? And where does commentary cross into harm? Some creators addressed this directly, urging caution and restraint. They reminded audiences that allegations are not facts, and speculation is not proof. Others dismissed those warnings as attempts to silence discussion. The tension between caution and confrontation became the heartbeat of the entire debate. Meanwhile, smaller details were elevated into symbols: missed appearances, delayed posts, carefully worded captions. Each was treated like a strategic move rather than a human choice. In an environment driven by speed, empathy struggled to survive. What made this phase especially unsettling was how complete the narrative began to feel without confirmation. For some viewers, the story already felt real, emotionally true, even if unverified. For others, that feeling itself was the danger. This is the paradox of viral culture. A story doesn't need evidence to feel finished. It just needs repetition. As speculation continued, the conversation widened again, this time into ethics. Is it possible to discuss allegations responsibly in public spaces designed for outrage? Can nuance survive algorithms that reward certainty and emotion? And at what point does silence stop being protective and start being interpreted as control? No one had definitive answers. But what became clear was this. Both Aaron Pierre and Teyana Taylor were no longer fully in control of their own narrative. The internet had taken over, remixing fragments into a storyline that felt cohesive, even if it wasn't confirmed. And that's the most dangerous moment in any viral controversy. Because once perception hardens, facts arrive late. As the second wave of attention peaked, anticipation grew for what might come next. Would someone speak? Would the story fade? Or would another voice add fuel, pushing the narrative into a new phase? Whatever happens next will matter, not just for those involved, but for how stories like this are handled going forward. Because this moment isn't just about two names trending together. It's about how quickly the digital world can transform uncertainty into belief, and how hard it is to reverse once it does. By the time the third phase began, the story no longer belonged to the people at the center of it. It belonged to the audience. This is the moment every viral controversy reaches eventually, when the internet stops waiting for answers and starts writing its own ending. Not based on evidence, not based on confirmation, but based on momentum. At this stage, pressure replaces curiosity. Viewers aren't asking what happened anymore. They're asking, why hasn't this been addressed yet? And that shift changes everything. Silence, which may have once been neutral or protective, becomes interpreted as strategy. Every non-move becomes a move. Every quiet day feels intentional. That's when escalation kicks in. Creators who previously stayed neutral begin choosing sides, sometimes subtly, sometimes openly. Phrases like, "I'm just asking questions," slowly give way to stronger language. The tone hardens, certainty creeps in, and once certainty enters a story without facts, it becomes almost impossible to remove. The comment sections reflect this shift immediately. What began as debate turns into verdicts. Supporters and critics stop talking to each other and start talking past each other. Anyone urging patience is accused of protecting power. Anyone pushing skepticism is labeled dismissive. Nuance becomes the first casualty. And then comes the most dangerous phase, normalization. The allegations, still unverified, begin to be referenced casually, as if they're already established. People don't say if this is true anymore. They say when this happened. The language evolves quietly, but the impact is massive. Repetition turns rumor into assumed context. This is how reputations take permanent damage, even without proof. At the same time, emotional fatigue sets in. Some viewers disengage entirely, overwhelmed by the intensity. Others double down, feeling invested not just in the story, but in being right. The controversy becomes personal, identity-based, moral. That's when the stakes rise beyond entertainment. Discussions shift toward consequences, career trajectories, industry relationships, brand decisions. People speculate about canceled projects, lost opportunities, and behind-the-scenes reactions. None of it is confirmed, but it feels plausible, and plausibility is enough to keep the engine running. Meanwhile, empathy becomes selective. One side emphasizes the seriousness of allegations and the importance of believing potential victims. The other emphasizes due process and the irreversible harm of false narratives. Both arguments matter, but online, they're rarely allowed to coexist. Instead, they collide. What makes this phase especially unsettling is how little room there is for resolution. Even if a statement were released, many viewers would already have their minds made up. Apologies get dissected, denials get doubted, silence gets condemned. there's no universally acceptable move once perception hardens. This is the trap of viral culture, and it raises a haunting question. Can the truth still matter once a story feels complete? History suggests the answer is complicated. We've seen countless situations where facts emerged months or years later, clarifications, legal outcomes, context that dramatically changed the narrative. But by then, the audience had moved on. The correction never traveled as far as the accusation. Screenshots remained. Thumbnails stayed online. First impressions won. That's why this moment matters beyond any single name. Because what's unfolding isn't just a controversy, it's a case study in how digital ecosystems handle uncertainty, how algorithms reward emotional certainty over careful doubt, how speed outruns accuracy, how attention becomes currency, even when the cost is human. As pressure peaked, some creators stepped back, acknowledging the limits of what could responsibly be said. Others leaned further in, chasing engagement with increasingly definitive framing. The divide widened, and still, no confirmed resolution. That unresolved tension is exactly what keeps stories like this alive. Not answers, but anticipation. The feeling that something must happen next, that the silence can't last forever. But sometimes it does. Sometimes stories don't end with statements or explanations. Sometimes they fade, not because they were resolved, but because attention moved elsewhere. And when that happens, the impact doesn't disappear. It just becomes quieter, lingering. For the people involved, that can mean living with a narrative they didn't fully choose. For audiences, it means carrying assumptions they may never revisit. For the culture, it means normalizing judgment without closure. And that's the real danger. Because the next time a similar story appears, and there will be a next time, the cycle repeats faster. Audiences feel trained, creators feel incentivized, platforms feel validated. Each controversy builds on the last, until skepticism feels cold and certainty feels righteous. This is why restraint matters, not silence forever, but responsibility in the meantime. Because stories involving real people don't reset when the algorithm does. As this chapter closes, one thing remains clear. Regardless of how this situation ultimately resolves, the internet has already shown its hand. It has demonstrated how quickly speculation can solidify, how difficult it is to reverse perception, and how easily humanity gets lost in the race to react. The truth, whatever it may be, deserves space to exist without being drowned out by momentum. And until that truth is known, the most honest position isn't belief or disbelief, it's patience. If you're watching this unfold, remember, allegations are not facts, silence is not proof, and viral certainty is not justice. Stay critical, stay human, and don't let the internet decide endings that real lives still have to live with.